All right, we're live. Hi, everybody out there on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to Audiobooks PDX. I am Margaret Pinard, and we're here for this next talk is fantasy escapism or idealism with Molly Ringle and Allan Batchelder, if I did that Brady Bunch thing right.
Yep.
There we go. So why don't you both say a little bit about your books and your background in writing?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Molly, and mostly I'll be talking today about my new book, Love Red Feather Blue. And it's fantasy, urban fantasy, and I've certainly written fantasy and paranormal before, but this is the first time I invented a whole new country for it. So that has been a fun challenge, and that's what I'm looking forward to talking to you and Allan about, because I know Allan has certainly done a lot of that. So go ahead, Allan.
Hi, I'm Allan, and I'll be talking a bit about my series, Immortal Treachery. And ironically, my books are just out of reach, so I'd have to get up and grab them.
Oh.
We'll be okay.
One of my copies of yours.
All right. And as I said, I'm Margaret, and I am a historical fiction writer. So I loved this topic because people don't always realize, if they're not writers, that you do a lot of world building for fantasy and science fiction, but you also have to do the same thing for historical, because it's a world you're creating for people to enter that doesn't exist anymore. So you may think you know what goes on there, but maybe you're on the wrong track. So we're here to set you straight. So yeah, we wanted to do a giveaway question for Molly's book that's coming out. She's going to be sending a lucky person a copy of this. Is it an ARC or it's a real one, right?
It's actually the final ones now. Yeah.
The final ones. Cool.
Yeah.
And we have
a
question we'd love you to answer in the comments. So for $100. For Lava Red Feather Blue, please say, what do you want to see more of in fantasy books? So Molly would love to know. Type in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll round everyone up by the end of the
over the next 45 minutes or whatever. It doesn't have to be immediately. You can think about it.
Yeah. So I'm looking at some of these great questions that Molly dreamed up for this panel. And let's just take this as the first one. It's 2020, and it's easy to see why someone would want to escape to another time or place. But we all started writing these genres long before this pandemic and the other turbulence of this year. So what is it that calls to you about writing a story in a time and or place completely different from your own? Why do you gravitate to fantasy or historical instead of contemporary? So,
I mean, yeah, when I started writing Love Red Feather Blue, it was early 2017, and you may remember what the mood was like in early 2017 and why I maybe went, I don't feel like writing my next book set in the current US. And I had always kind of had this notion of it'd be cool to invent another country, especially if it were an island country off the coast of North America somewhere. And so I went, maybe now's a good time to do that. But yeah, then as I've been working on it, it's been a very good escape. And of course, it turns out that sometimes the problems that we actually are dealing with now do find their way in to the fictional country, and I think that's unavoidable. And we can talk about that later. But yeah, it's been a very good escape, but it also has been a way of coping, kind of, with what the world is inevitably like.
I would really agree. I find that fantasy, writing it anyway, and to some extent reading it, allows you to punish those who need punishment and reward those who need rewarding, and you feel so powerless in the real world, often, and you can't make the bad guys suffer, and you can't reward virtue, but you do have that opportunity. And you can also flip those things on their heads. You can reward evil and punish virtue too, which is if you're dark and twisted, as I am, that can be fun.
Exactly.
Yeah. For me, I think I also veer or lean more towards the side of escapism in terms of why I gravitate towards it, sort of without knowing. I intuit that that's the most interesting story to me. It's definitely escapism. The romance of the other side of the fence is how, like, grass is always greener. That's been a theme in my life for sure. I've also got a curiosity for the other and how we grow and change. So looking at a different period where people had different moral certainties or had different values that, like, it's really hard to see why people would think in that logical way. Like, it made sense at some point, but just not to the modern viewer. So that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. You get to, that is part of the appeal, as well as, like, in thinking of a different society entirely, you'd have to decide what are their values and what is normal for them that we would consider strange, or vice versa. And it does it, and then it makes you reflect on how weird your own culture actually is. You go, you know, we chose to do things this way, and I don't know why. Maybe we don't have to. So yeah, then it's fun to play with and try to extrapolate. If you make a different societal rule, how does that affect the rest of the culture? And you can really go down rabbit holes with that, but it is still fun as well to think about.
So have either of you guys, silly question, read The Left Hand of Darkness, which is like starting with that different physiological question and going off into how that changes society?
I haven't actually read it, but is that the one where the genders are
you can switch
different?
Yeah,
that was groundbreaking. No, I haven't gone as far as that. It is hard to imagine getting into it as different a mindset as that, but it's also really cool. And that, obviously, that book opened up a lot of people's thinking, which is.
I do have some gender swapping in my story. So it's actually a major plot element for the entire book, I think. So
I think I know
that
part you mean there. Yeah. There. Yeah, and
oh no, not again.
Oh no. You're good.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. Yeah, I have a one character. It's one of the side characters is they them pronouns, and that's the first time I've done that. And probably it didn't have to be. It shouldn't have been, but that was a good thing to experiment with. And I decided in this culture, no one even notices that or comments on it. It's just a thing that could be there. Same with sexuality. No one, I don't even use labels in it. I don't think it is a guy love story, but I don't think I use the word gay in it anywhere, or even queer. It's just people are whatever they are on this island, and that would be kind of cool to see. I felt like in society. Yeah. So, and again, that's one of those choices that the culture made, that we probably could be like that. It's not physically impossible or anything. So yeah, it was fun to play with.
On the other hand, we've come a long way since the Puritans.
Yes, even since the 1970s.
Yeah. I wanted to point to one of Molly's other questions that this brings up. So if you were on this island saying, wow, people can just be what they want to be and it's accepted, wouldn't that be amazing? She wrote, one problem I came up against in creating my fictional country was that I wanted to make it the type of society we aspire to. More inclusion, less prejudice, more harmony. In addition to magic, of course, which we would all love. Well, I mean, it would create its own set of problems again, yeah. But I soon realized a perfect society was boring and had to give it flaws and corruption, at least in some ways, or else there'd be very little tension, which a plot needs. What are the ways you've dealt with the balance of wanting to show admirable qualities in your world while also needing to make some aspects of the world problematic in order to provide story tension? And so I'm just going to give a sort of another teaser add-on to that, which is, who are your goodies and baddies? Because that question really gets at what you consider to be admirable qualities, and if you put them in a different context, like how are you shifting that aspirational balance, I guess? Yeah,
I had that was my main problem, because in the earliest parts of the draft, I was like, well, I'm also going to make this government the thing that I would want to see, and they're admirable and responsible. And then I realized as I got further that if that were the case, then the government would have taken care of these enchantment-related problems that come up, and our protagonists could have sat back and relaxed, and there wouldn't have been any interesting thing going on. So I decided, what if the government isn't so trustworthy? But it was not for reasons of being, say, homophobic or racist exactly. It was more that it was about, say, human greed, and that they wanted more power, and that they didn't trust other groups. Maybe it's sort of in a racist way, but more in just a greed and power way, which I think is going to be a problem as long as there are humans, and possibly Fae. I also have Fae on this island, and that's part of the tension. But yeah, that people, for one thing, people are always going to make mistakes, and for another thing, people are probably always going to be, some of them anyway, motivated by wanting money and power, and that's going to cause them to not mind oppressing others or cheating others, and that can lead to really huge problems, actually, even if they're otherwise what we might call good, progressive people in terms of how they look at the world. They could still cause huge problems that way. So that was kind of what I ended up with as the bad guys, is all of those who want to cheat and get power over others and don't mind hurting way too many people in the process.
Even when you agree in principle, you can have some pretty heated disagreements. And I often think of the comedian Emo Phillips routine about he encounters a guy who's about to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he's trying to talk him out of it. And he's discovering, oh, well, what about God? And the says, well, I used to believe in God. Really? What were you a Christian or a Jew? Oh, I was a Christian. Oh, me too. What was your denomination? Oh, I was a Baptist. Oh, me too. Were you a Southern Baptist or a Northern Baptist? And this goes on for 10 minutes, down to the tiniest Council of 1812 or Southern Lakes Great Lake Region Council of, and they have the tiniest difference. And at the end, Emo Phillips yells, "Heretic!" And I pushed him off the bridge. So they have everything in common spiritually, except this one tiny, minute detail, and it results in violence. So
and that's what we focus on, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even when you're planning on a utopia and you think everyone's on the same page, you can still have these deeply felt disagreements that can result in violence. And that's even our history as a nation. You had in the founding of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, we talked about the Puritans earlier. You had other Puritans who said, well, I don't agree with your exact reading of the Bible, so I'm going to go found the Rhode Island colony or whatever it was.
Roger Williams, whose 11th great granddaughter we had on earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, Rhode Island. Small world. Yeah.
But I explore that in different ways. I have an old queen who's based on Queen Elizabeth I, and he's trying to essentially rule the world, and she has an altruistic vision, but the way she goes about it is kind of draconian. And then I have another city-state that's entirely made up of women, because that's their solution, that's the problem with society. So, and they only bring them in for purposes of reproduction on rare occasions.
Yeah, there is that part.
I don't dwell on the sex part of it in my stories. That's just me.
Yeah. As in identity?
No, on the leisure activity or the reproductive activity.
Yeah.
I got to say, Molly's stories can be pretty hot and spicy at times.
I know. Mine are always a romance in some way. So I know I don't always send them anymore to my relatives. I think it makes them uncomfortable. I've gotten over it, but
yeah.
I've got situations where there's sex involved, whether it's like actually happening or behind the door or reference to the next morning or something. And in terms of making it different, so it's a different world for people to get into, I'm still using it as a source of tension and of comfort in different examples. And so that's the same, but the obstacles you have to get there and the levels of comfort for the different parties, they are different. So that's something I try to take into account for sure.
Especially in historical, I imagine, where
Yeah.
you have the ingrained rules about purity, probably more than a modern setting would, or maybe a different country, depending.
Yeah, well, the whole instant gratification that we have now is very different from the attitude of denial that, Scots in the early 19th century had. So that was definitely like a different mindset to get into.
Right, just accepting that, no, that would be wrong. That just is wrong. Yeah.
It's like a wall in your mind, which I think we have a lot more windows in our thinking these days in terms of seeing other people's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of the challenge with a utopia type of idea, where everyone could see each other's point of view. Well, they probably still don't sometimes, though, even though they could.
Yeah.
Well, we're Pacific Northwest authors. If we were including some people from Mississippi and Alabama in this conversation, we might be going off in a different direction. It's just values are different regionally, and
different ages, different generations. It very much depends on background. So yeah. And I've had even the Pacific Northwest angle. People sometimes comment on things that I take for granted, and so I put in my books, like, how come your characters always have these cloth shopping bags with them? I'm like, you mean you don't? Oh, okay. Or why are they always so into coffee and tea?
Right.
No, you mean everyone isn't? Oh, okay.
Warm drinks, exactly. Yeah. Olaf and warm hugs. You just need them. I like you commented earlier about how Portland is America's kinkiest city, and Seattle was like, yep, verified.
I think that's
it's those anarchist jurisdictions, I think.
Yeah, we're these anarchists. We don't even know.
That is the catchphrase of the year, I think, for us. So hey, own it, right?
Close the window against all the tear gas out here.
Yeah.
It's chaos out there, man. It's not. It's been completely quiet.
Right. I kept taking pictures on my walks of like normal life. Yeah, like hello.
Well, Alan and I are in West Seattle, so we're like cut off from the rest of Seattle anyway by the bridge being down lately. So we're pretty much
an entire century behind.
We're basically West Vashon now. Yeah.
That's true.
Wow, that's right. That's right. Elise Hooper, I've seen her on a couple panels, and she was it was like after it failed, or they determined that they had to close it down, and she was saying that they were trying to get around that. That's right.
Yeah, we don't even know what's happening downtown.
Yeah. Probably better not to know, right? No.
Yes. We make our own fantasy country out here.
What about, so here's a question for you guys, since you have more magic. I have time travel, but that's not really like a whole magic system. So how do you balance magic and technology? It's one of Alan's questions. It's a great one. Consider that.
Yeah, I lean more heavily toward magic, because I feel like if you go more into inventive technology, then you're more into sci-fi than because if you have a technological explanation, then I think that's basically the definition of sci-fi, and I like sort of the unknowable aspects, and therefore I'm more on the magic side. But yeah, I do actually have things like computers and cell phones and cars in my stories, because it's more urban fantasy than pure epic fantasy. And I did in this one, in Love Red, Feather Blue, I had ways of applying magic to those technologies so that they can go further than they can for us, which was kind of fun to explore. But if you ask me, how technologically does that work? I don't know, because it's magic. It's not sci-fi. It's fantasy.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of fun to just add on to tech a little bit with magic.
It's such a fertile topic, because there are those who would say that technology is magic, that the less technologically adept don't understand. Yeah. And then you have the people who want your magic system to be so incredibly logic based that it becomes science fiction. And I agree with Molly that it's magic for a reason.
We're soft magic rather than hard magic, as they call it.
Right. Yes.
What's the difference there?
Well, that I think like Gandalf's magic is what you would call soft magic, because we have no idea how he does it or even what the limits are of his powers. He just does it, and he's a wizard, and we're like, cool, he's a wizard, he can do that. Whereas hard magic systems are like, these are the rules. You have this kind of metal, and it can do this, this, and this. And if you don't have it, you can't do it. And they are very detailed. And I think it is just a matter of taste. Some people are so into the hard magic detailed rules, and I'm more on the soft side, though I mean, we all have to have some rules. But
Right.
yeah, I kind of like the mystery side of it. And also, I don't want to paint myself into a corner by writing a rule that I later wish I hadn't written.
Yeah.
But there has to be a cost of some sort. Otherwise, why not just do magic 24/7 for everything you wanted? So in my world, for example, it's physically painful to use magic, and it becomes like an addiction. And so the longer you use it, the more it distorts you. And a constant search to control. It's called burning. There's a constant search to control the burning. But if you've ever played a game like Dungeons and Dragons, you know, there are limitations to how powerful you can get. Otherwise, you take the suspense right out of the story.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that we've all picked apart the rules and powers in Harry Potter. We've all been like, if you have the time turner, you can fix absolutely everything that ever went wrong in this series, and why haven't you? But so yeah, you don't want to make things too powerful. Exactly. You have to make there be a cost. Like I have in Lover and Feather Blue, there's the Fey realm and the human realm, and they both know about each other and all that. But humans basically can't deal in the Fey realm. Like there's so much power that the Fey do basically have almost unlimited.
Oh no!
Almost unlimited powers. But when humans are around that too much, they pretty much will lose their minds or just get weirdly ill or something. And so it has to be taken lightly as a human frame.
Does that weakness for humans have any correlation to something in the real world? Is that like a symbol? Have you thought about that, or is that something that stirs something in your mind right now?
I mean, I try to keep the allegory pretty loose because I don't want to try to make it too definitely allegorical. The only thing I would say is the Fae are basically like the forces of nature. So it could be that we don't want to abuse nature or its powers, and also our own inventions. And
yeah, that's kind of what I was leaning towards.
Yeah, that's
when we get too involved in our own machinations. Yeah, they get control of us instead.
Well, COVID has created this interesting dichotomy where on the one hand you can choose to disbelieve it. I disbelieve COVID, or I disbelieve the value of masks. And on the other hand, you have those who are over invested in the science, like the vaccine is instantly going to cure the whole world and we're going to be dancing in the streets next week. So I do think a middle road is probably wise in that case.
Yeah, the moderation in any kind of power is another way of looking at the allegory, I suppose, if there is one. It was one of the things I wrote down. I don't go as far as Tolkien and say that I dislike allegory and cordially dislike allegory.
I love that.
It was from him because he had enough of people saying that Lord of the Rings was really about World Wars I and II, because he didn't think it was. But obviously he lived through them, and it probably did affect what he had written somewhat. And you can certainly draw a parallel, and it's not a harmful thing to draw. So I don't mind if people find useful parallels, as long as they're not justifying something awful with what I've written. But I don't think that they'd find a way to do that.
I had a friend who used to say that the author doesn't always know what he or she has written into a work. You know, you can ask me to identify every little thing, but you might find things that are actually there that I didn't consciously intend, but are nonetheless identifiable.
Yeah, I always say what the story means to the reader is what the story means to the reader. I can't go over there and take it out of their heads and say, no, you're not allowed to have it mean that to you. So,
right.
Yeah.
I made I made a note about that in the back of my books on pronunciation. This is the way I pronounce the character names, but I mean, you're the one who bought the book and is pronounce them however you want, you know.
That's true. That's again, Tolkien he gives you a pronunciation guide. In fact, the whole language. But yeah, I haven't listed those. If people ask me, I say, well, I've been saying it this way in my head, but I'm not gonna go insisting and getting mad about it.
Yeah. No need to be dictatorial, I suppose.
Right. Especially when I also wrote about the Greek myths, and you know, we have our Western, well, they're Western too, but our English ways of saying the Greek gods' names. And I kind of did some of the research and was sort of pronouncing them more of the ancient Greek ways in my head, but sort of, but I wasn't going to make everyone do that. And so, yeah.
I really liked listening to Stephen Fry's mythology on audio because he had some different pronunciations from ones I was used to for all the gods, goddesses that I had heard of, and a lot that I hadn't or had just read. And so I was like, oh, okay. You know, it's nice to like hear it. But again, different interpretations.
Yeah. I love his voice too. That would be especially nice.
Yeah. So Alan had another great question about Western world things as well. So he's asking, do you feel any obligation to branch out beyond Western fantasy notions and tropes? And if so, how do you do so without seeming guilty of cultural appropriation? Or is that even a concern? And so I have a sort of a parallel I can draw with historical, but let's hear about fantasy first, how you sort of handle that angle of representation / not Western centered.
That is really hard because obviously I'm from the Western world, and my people, if you count my ancestors as my people, would be English and Scottish and German. And so these are the traditional fairy tale type creatures. And I did use the names of those in Love Red, Feather Blue for at least most of the Fae. Like there are Kelpies and sprites and things. But also I did kind of use other cultures, fairy type spirits. So like there's what I call jinns, that's the more proper Arabic word for genies and things like that. They're just there. I wasn't making them a whole culture of their own. They're just among the Fae. But yeah, it is really hard. Like you don't want to bring in stereotypes, I think is the main thing to be especially careful of. Like if you're going to base anything on an existing culture, make sure you're not bringing stereotypes along that either especially are bad, but even if they're good, you don't want to make it a monolithic thing. And I don't know, I mainly go with trying to invent my own as much as possible because I don't want to appropriate, but I do want to do something different. I don't want it to be a copy of Lord of the Rings.
Well, when you're talking about a world too, you have to assume that it has its corresponding other cultures that are radically different perhaps than the one you're focused on. So in mine, the main character travels to a different continent, and I have one group of people who are loosely based on the Zulu. And I was highly self-conscious about it, you know, because I'm a white man, and I tried to be as respectful as I could and as general in a way so that I wasn't treading on any toes. But you also want to include those things. So, you know, if you get demerit for presuming to represent somebody, I hope you get some recognition for trying to be more inclusive and recognizing that not everything is from English culture, for example.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. That there should be diversity for the sake of inclusion and not just the same old thing because we were afraid to try something new.
Right. So I get this feeling in reading Tolkien that everyone is not necessarily English, but I mean, even the orcs, you know, have a certain English or, you know, Scots, Irish feeling about them.
Or the north of the border type impression that you have of them. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
From the mind, maybe. Yeah.
Or Scandinavian, but there isn't really an Asian influence or South American kind of flavor to it.
Nope. I mean, he consciously based it on, I think it might have even been Norse mythology a lot too. So
yeah.
But yeah, that Middle Earth was the British Isles. How's that feel?
What would you say to like a spectrum of steps of people like Western centered and then token characters that are stereotypes, and then having more than one token character and having a diversity but not giving them much internal diversity, and then having a cast that has more characters of different backgrounds that all have the same amount of complexity, or not all, because then you'd have a 900-page tome, but have a varying level of investment. And I feel like that's the spectrum that we're dealing with this at this point in terms of like where we're heading for fantasy / literature in general. Is that something you'd agree with, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I feel like it was getting sort of common in recent years to have, well, there's more diversity. You know, there's people of color in the story, but they're the sidekicks. They're not the main characters.
Right.
And now we're getting to finally, no, they're the main characters. We can do that. There's no reason not to do that. Or LGBTQ people, or someone from a culture that we are not as familiar with, and they get to be the hero of their own story. It was very much in vogue to have the, as they call it now, great white savior type of stories, where it's about ancient Japan, but it's about a white guy who comes and saves them. And, yeah.
The Last Samurai, perhaps?
I'm not going to name names, but
yeah, exactly.
It was a good enough book, but you know.
Well, it is challenging because you're strongest writing what you know, and I'm a middle-aged white guy, and you know, early on, somebody said, "Why do you think you can write women? What gives you the right to write women?" Well, I have 3 really strong vocal sisters, and I had a mother, obviously, and I have a wife. So, although I'm a woman, I've been greatly influenced by them my whole life, and most of my bosses my whole life have been women. And I mean, you got to have a little leeway to venture into that territory. The other thing you can do is support LGBTQ authors and promote people of color who write. You know, have them on your blog, have them on your website, review their books.
Yeah. Read more diversely yourself. Just talk about it.
Yes.
Just learn. Let them have the floor sometimes is kind of what we've been learning more this year. And it's definitely been uncomfortable sometimes for us white people and people of privilege just to listen to this and realize we don't get it, and we should learn that and let them talk. Yeah.
But I think there's growth in discomfort. You know, when you're comfortable, you're not always learning very much.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely. And I feel like I've made mistakes sometimes in little details in my writing that could have been more sensitive or more informed, and people will call you out on it in reviews, but you know, that's how you learn. And I've learned that, and I can say, yeah, I wish I had done that differently, but I will do it differently going forward.
Right.
So, and that's when no author is spared that. There's always someone who's going to be offended by something.
If you look, you'll see 1- and 2-star reviews of Hamlet on Goodreads and Amazon.
Yes.
You know? People just think it's garbage.
Feel better. Yeah.
All right. We had some other suggestions about subgenres. What about getting more to our books here? What's something about your fictional world that you're very glad we don't have in the U.S. now, or the Pacific Northwest in our neighborhoods?
Yeah, in Love, Red, Feather, Blue, I mean, I mostly really like that world, and I would be happy to go there. But they do live right alongside the Fae realm, and the Fae are sometimes intermingling with them. And some of the Fae are extremely dangerous and want to burn things down and enspell people. And honestly, it's just as well that I don't live alongside that. So there's that.
All right. Terrible dark creatures. All right, good.
Yeah,
I was going to say hordes of cannibalistic inbred humanoids. I'm glad we don't have a lot of those.
Don't speak too soon. 2020 is not over.
Exactly.
That's
On
true.
my bingo card.
It's true. We got
No,
murder
yeah.
hornets and meth gators and
Yeah. God.
Tornadoes of toads or whatever is next. Yes.
So I had a couple that I have in my books that I don't believe we have now. So schools that discriminate based on religion. That's a big sort of starting conflict for one of my characters, and I think that's basically because we've become more secular, as Becky talked about earlier, and de jure segregation of races and cultures. So we had like the natives that were in Nova Scotia sort of segregated to one place that they could live. And of course, we all know about redlining and all of that stuff, the history that is still with us. But de jure versus de facto is like, well, okay, is that progress? Are we graduating? Hey, it's in the book, but not happening right now. I was reaching there because all the legacies are still with us. So
yeah. I was just going to say, I feel like without naming names or getting too political, I feel like that's part of what the unrest is in our country right now, is that there are people who would like to go back to that.
Yeah.
Their utopian society is more, one single race and perhaps even a single century. And there are others of us who I'm perfectly comfortable if in my lifetime, the majority of people in this country are brown. It doesn't bother me. Who cares? I'm not married to my race in any way, shape, or form. I profit from it. I recognize that. I benefit from it. But I would be totally comfortable if white people were in the minority. So.
Exactly. It's weird to me that is a fear that some people wake up with. But I was thinking that, Margaret, when you're talking about different areas of land for different people, I think that's another of those things that is going to be an issue in every country, in every time in history, is because there is always limited land, and then there's always going to be, well, we should have this, and this is a group that gets this part, and this is a group that gets that part. I think that's an issue in my Fey and human country. There's the dividing line. And in fact, I was calling it the border at first. And then this was back when the main issue in the news was not COVID, but the Mexican-American border. And I thought, I don't want people to think I'm talking about that border. I'm not really, it's not an allegory for that. So I changed the name of it. I called it The Verge. But, a border is going to be a contentious thing in basically any country in any time. And so that's another of those inevitable things, I think, about human culture or even Fey culture, possibly.
Yeah.
Certainly, arbitrary human-imposed borders are the ones that are the problem. There's a border there because we all agree or we say so, but when the ocean is a border, for example, people don't tend to argue about that. They don't go, France continues all the way to the shore, the eastern shore of the United States. No, we accept that there's an ocean there. And
unless it's a pirate story, and are we in international waters or?
Yes.
Fishing rights involved, like in Nova Scotia.
UK.
Yes, true.
How many fish can be left in that area anyway?
Lobsters, actually. Lobsters is what's under right now.
Ah.
So you talk about idealism, and we've talked a lot about the problems, but what if we shifted to like, what do we see as solutions? Or is it just sort of the people magically started this way for the fantasy parts? I was having a conversation earlier with my mom actually about optimism and helping people, and it was referencing another conversation. So this is how it works in my family. They just sort of weave forward in the future. And it was whether optimism and selflessness are related. And I think they're different qualities. You can be selfless, but still be a realist or a pessimist, but want to help people. Or you could be, essentially selfish and think that the world's going to end up going your way. So I kind of see these on different spectrums, but she thought they kind of go on the same go along together. Like if you help other people, it's because you're an optimist, or maybe not caused, but correlated. And so I'm thinking about our ideal worlds, like how much of that is optimism in the characters, and how much of it is selflessness? Like to throw those things in there and just like have you evaluate your character based on that.
Yeah, the world I built with, it's sort of their religion almost, but it's also because it's what they can see with all the magic around them is sort of a 4-element system, and therefore it's more nature-based than what we usually see in religions. And so it's sort of what I would say is part of the solution, is being more aware of what actual nature needs and how we can exist with that without hurting it too much or hurting ourselves too much as part of the process, which is probably, avoiding excess is a lot of it, like we were saying, in greed and in exploitation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is hard because I feel like sometimes I'm being too rosy and hope we can make this all work. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
People will always want
it for your characters. Everyone else can go rot, right?
Well, Molly creates worlds that you'd actually like to live in. I don't know that mine's pretty dark. I don't know that you'd want.
It would be hard to visit.
To flip things on its head, I would say that, Hitler had his utopian ideal of what the world that he wanted to see, which was a nightmare for the rest of us. So I have a couple of characters, 2 or 3 actually, who have an ideal version for the world that they're very excited about, but it's not good for humanity in general, or even,
Yeah, that's the thing, is that thing they always tell you, right? That the villain thinks that they are the hero of the story. They're thinking, I have a really good reason for what I'm doing here. You'll all thank me in the end.
Right.
Well, some of you won't, but.
But you won't be here to complain.
Right. That's not going to be a problem.
All right. Well, we have the converse for that question. So in terms of something in the fictional world that you wish we did have or could learn from. And I just thought of one thing, which is bog myrtle. So it still exists in Scotland. It's just not here in the New World. And that's something I wish we had here because it smells lovely and it's medicinal. So, but please go on with more serious answers. Yes.
Well, this isn't super serious, but yeah, since it is Yola Book of Flood here, it's festive. I gave them better holidays than we have. Like, our American holidays are so boring, except for Halloween. Halloween is awesome. We need more like that, where we get to like go out at night in costumes and roam the streets, that kind of thing. Okay. So I gave them a year full of cool festivals, and each one was different. I didn't actually go into a lot of detail about what they do on each. I gave myself some possibility to explore that in the future. But yeah, we need better festivals. I'm going to give them better festivals.
Wow, there's so many possibilities, but I'm going to go with whatever the magic equivalent of teleportation is, the ability, I call it the here, there in one of my parts of the story.
Portals, yeah.
Yeah, it's so time saving, but then think about the time that we've saved versus, the Oregon Trail used to take like 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever, and now you can fly the whole
die of dysentery.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was fun, but
yeah, no, that's a good point. That would save fossil fuels too, right? Without all the cars to take us places and things. Yeah.
Right. You could have lunch have lunch in Paris,
Yeah, you consent with the here there though. So here's the thing. To Zoom and whatnot, you have to have consent. I mean, absent Google listening in on all your conversations. What do you do with consent in terms of the here there? Can people just beam into your shower? Like, how does that work?
See, that's a brilliant question. There's a whole novel right there.
Here you go.
Lawsuit. There's a lawsuit there.
Nice.
Yeah, reading the comments. Cool. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, some great comments. I was going to highlight our hat game, but since then, y'all have donned, whatever the word, doffed the hat. So I'll go ahead and do that too. We had some great comments earlier. Let's just go through and see if we have questions, and then I'll do our giveaway roundup. If anyone else has the answer to what do you want more of in fantasy after hearing us talk about all these interesting tropes and here or there. Just comment with your answer. There we go. I had to go find it. So we've got
Halloween's my favorite holiday, by the way.
Mine too. Halloween is the absolute best of the ones we get to celebrate in boring secular America.
Yeah. I like Christmas. I don't know.
Pretty good, actually. Christmas.
I literally celebrate. I literally celebrate Halloween from July 7th to the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's just 103rd day of Halloween, and people are already talking about Christmas. Yeah.
Well, see, I one of my Christmas traditions is watching The Grinch and Boris Karloff's voice. Like, that's just like.
Yeah, I love that. Yes.
You know,
every Who-Will likes Christmas a lot, but the who lived just north of Whoville did not.
That is really good.
That is really good. Yeah.
Applause.
Have you done any audiobook narrating, Alan?
I'm thinking about it. I went out and bought a $300 mic, but the time of the day, I'm one of these people with lots of books to write. I want to learn to play guitar before I die. I can draw, I can all this other nonsense, but I also have a full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of time, but you could do it with the voice if you find the time.
Right.
Oh, I was trained to do it. That would be a good way to, justify the tens of thousands of dollars I spent on graduate school.
Yeah. Well, Audible and all those others are really taking off with I guess audiobook sales are actually skyrocketing. So
percentage change winner. Yeah, for sure. We had someone write in, Peggy was writing in about another discipline where it's the same thing. Like you write it and then people will take from it what they want. She says her sister-in-law is a painter and says she's always wondering what people think the painting is about. I mean, like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Peggy is my sister. So yeah. Yeah, we have a few painters in the family, and it is funny in the abstract ones. You're like, I think it's a sunset, and I see war, and that maybe they didn't mean that at all. But,
right.
I just want to go into a James Beard winning restaurant and order the fanciest thing on the meal and take a bite and go, it represents man's inhumanity to man.
Like food, too. Yeah.
You know what that reminds me of? We have a few minutes left. You know what that reminds me of is the thing where people do spoofs about like paying authors or paying artists with like in kind or publicity.
Oh yeah.
Like they go somewhere and they're like, oh yes, I'd like to pay for that with a thank you, or I'd like to pay for that with publicity, and you're like, excuse me, doctor appointment, like dentist or something. And you're like,
pay for my dinner with some exposure. I'll give you a Yelp review.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. More than the money spent buying the books at my phase is just the reviews. The reviews are worth gold,
Yeah, places like Amazon I think they honestly will bump your book to more visibility if it gets like more than 50 reviews or something like that. We don't know. They don't share all their algorithms, but it appears that way. So it really does matter.
When you know that thousands of people have read your books, but you've only got, 50 reviews or whatever, it's like, really? Just write one sentence.
Yeah, tell me write in 2 sentences the things you liked best about. My favorite things were this and this. It really doesn't have to be an amazing essay. I think people feel shy, like, oh, I'm not a writer. I can't write a cool review. But
I'd be happy.
You don't need it to be fancy.
I'd be happy to give people starter reviews. Like, I loved this character's name. Or, like, that scene in the stable was cool. Or, like.
I love the weird random ones. I had something like for Persephone's Orchard, like, first of all, the book isn't as slutty as the cover looks. I just wanted to throw that out there, which is still one of the most hilarious ones I've had, and I love it. So,
nice. All right. So I wanted to point your attention to the feedback thing. So we've got a attendee survey. I haven't been able to say this verbally, but for anyone else, we're giving away a free audiobook from Libro if you enter your email at the end. So we'd love to get your feedback about the Yellow Book of Floyd PDX. And random number, let's see. Calculator.com. I had this open a second ago. There we go.
Random.org works too. Yeah.
And it's Peggy. Peggy Cafe.
All right. I know what she is. That's easy.
Do you want to tell her how to email you, her name, email, and address? Yeah.
I know her. That one's easy.
Oh, okay. Wait, did you say that's your sister?
That is my sister.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Cool.
Nepotism. Margaret picked it. It wasn't me.
Yeah, I didn't know it wasn't her. So yeah, we have a title for the next panel. Will crime fiction change 2020's impact on research methods, with Robert Degoni, Kim Taylor Blakemore, and our own Elle Mitchell. So stay tuned in just a few minutes. But thank you so much for attending our talk. And Molly and Allan, so great to meet you and have you along for the process and the ride.
That was really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for viewing, and
guys
around.